Hi everyone, this is Hannah from Jewishworkshops, and I'm so happy to be joining all of you today. And we are extremely privileged to have Rabbi Akiva Tatz, who is one of our acclaimed teachers in our Jewishworkshops ongoing community courses. Before we get started, I'd love to welcome everyone joining us today, especially all of our new members on the line. For everyone new and old, please find the chat box on the right-hand side of your computer screen or through the GoToWebinar app on your smartphone, so you can send in your questions throughout the webinar. But first, if you could please put in your name and where you're joining us from, I would love to be able to welcome you. Wow, there's so many people coming in. Dan and Yuki from Seattle, and Salman from Los Angeles, Charlotte from California, and Tikva from LA, Les from Chicago, Linda from St. Louis, Lieb and Sarah Rigler from Jerusalem, Stan Rice from South Africa, Cheryl from New Jersey. Wow, it's going so fast I can barely keep up with it. Renee from the USA, Miriam from Scottsdale, Lucy from San Francisco, Simon from England, Sarah from Luxembourg, Sarah from Minneapolis. Wow, Sarah from Jerusalem, Leanne from Edmonton, Canada. They're still coming in. Wow, Jody from Sydney, Australia, Sandy from Atlanta, Mindy from Florida, Max from Albuquerque, Faggy from Hampstead, New York, Karen from Chile. Wow, the list can go on and on. Welcome everyone. This is truly a worldwide event, and it's so nice to see so many people from across the globe. If anybody has any questions about how you can become a greater part of the Jewish Workshops community, please feel free to reach out to Jewish Workshops at jewishworkshops.com for more information. As we mentioned, we are truly honored to have Rabbi Tatz with us for this special Passover webinar. Each week we have hundreds of his members join him in connecting through the teachings of Mesilas Yesharim. But today we are especially grateful and appreciative that Rabbi Tatz can give us this gift by joining us and over 2,000 viewers in spiritually preparing for Passover. So without further ado, I will turn the microphone over to you, Rabbi Tatz. Welcome and thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Okay, thanks Hannah for this for that introduction. Thanks to Bracha, who's also in the background, making sure that our technical service runs, and greetings to all of you. I usually try to greet our members personally, but I can't do that now. I think we had more than 1,000 people sign up for this, so you'll have to forgive me for that. I did see one or two names that I haven't seen for a long time. Dr. Ress in Cape Town, it's a pleasure to have you, Stan. And just as the names flashed past, I saw a few others. So I'm not going to greet you personally. Welcome to all our regulars. I do see Jody here, and I see Doug and a few others. I'm not going to take time to go through the whole list. First of all, let me, as I always do, let me thank Jewish Workshops for making this portal available. Thanks to Orsameach, who lend me out to this operation. Thanks to all of our VIPs, very interested persons, who are part of our usual weekly group. And I thank the group for being so open to host a open session to non-subscribers as a pre-Pesach open session. So we'll just have to manage with the large numbers, and we won't be able to take personal questions as we usually do. Please feel free to type in a question if you want to, and you'll have to forgive me if I don't relate to it personally, just because it's a little unmanageable with these numbers. What time is, I see a few people from Sydney, Australia. What time is it in Sydney, Jody? It must be 7 in the morning, I think, no? Or maybe 6. Melbourne, Jess, what time is it there? 6 a.m. Okay, Chaim, I got to hand it to you for getting up at 6 in the morning to prepare for Pesach, but I certainly appreciate your being with us. And I see people from all over the world, most names not familiar to me, so you are very welcome. Thanks for joining us. Let's spend a little bit of time today, tonight, this morning, this afternoon, wherever you are in the world, what time of day it is for you. Let's try to look a little bit more deeply into Pesach by way of preparing us for the Yom Tov, for the festival, for the Seder. I'm going to assume a basic level of Jewish knowledge. I will do my best to try to translate everything. If I miss something or something's not clear, go ahead and ask. I'll do my best to notice and and I will try to answer. You're welcome to get our email address afterwards from Bracha or Jewish Workshops. If you have a question that I wasn't able to deal with, you will welcome to answer us, to ask questions by email in personal fashion. I will tell you that if you want a reference for what I'm about to say, a lot of it comes from Rav Moshe Shapiro. Those whose Hebrew is good enough, you can listen to him talking about this subject originally, a couple of shirim in Hebrew, Yiddish. I must say that I've just written a book which does go into this particular subject a little bit more deeply. That's called As Dawn Ends the Night. In fact, it's at the printer now. You might like to see the cover. As Dawn Ends the Night. In fact, the cover is actually a painting done by my wife. Okay, she did the original painting and we used that for the cover. And if you like a reference, that book is not out yet, but it's at the printers. I would very much hope in the next couple of weeks after Pesach, it'll be out and you can look up references and much more detail about this subject. But I'll try to give you an overview of an aspect of Pesach that is deeper than people are usually accustomed to dealing with. And I'm going to do this to give us a bit of insight that is usually reserved for the children. You know, I'm sure that the Pesach Seder, the Passover Seder, the ceremony is dedicated to the children. This is the time when we pass on the fundamentals of Judaism to the next generation. But of course, we should enjoy it as well. And therefore, there are many references and resources you can use for making it fascinating for the children. I'm going to try to focus at a slightly deeper level. It is true that what I'd like to talk about today is not suitable for the young children. Much more sophisticated message. So when the children have gone to sleep, after they've fallen asleep with their nose in the soup, you can lift the discussion to a higher level and talk about some of the stuff that I'd like to share with you. And what I'd like to talk about is a Zohar. Stay with me, please. This is not easy. This is not easy. You need to think on a different level. And I'd like to talk about a Zohar. The Zohar says, Zohar, I'm sure you know, is the classic Kabbalistic source work, right, written in the Mishnaic period. And the Zohar says that the exile in Egypt was an exile of speech. Exile of speech, what we call Golus HaDibur. Speech was in exile, right? And the freeing from Egypt, the exodus from Egypt, the redemption from Egypt was the redemption of the faculty of speech. Obviously, this needs explanation. What is being said here? The Zohar, as you know, is teaching us the compressed essence of spiritual principles. That's what Kabbalistic wisdom always is. It is the deep principles, underlying genetic material of Torah, if you like. And so understanding these principles always pays richly because it's always the rules underlying the details that you want to understand. If you're a physicist or a chemist or a doctor, you're not interested in the details, you're interested in the rules, the laws. And that is what the deeper aspect of Judaism is. So let's try to go into this deep subject. Yet we're talking about Moshe Shapiro. Indeed, I'll try to put together a few things that I learned from him and see if we can. Do I have a picture of him? For those who are not familiar with him, I have a picture right here. For those who'd like to remember of Moshe Shapiro, right, my great Rebbe. Picture taken at my daughter's wedding. That was Rav Moshe, and unfortunately we lost him a year ago. And so we live from what he taught us. And I'd like to share with you a particular aspect, some fascinating stuff that I learned from him that you'll find, I think, fundamental to all of Judaism and all of the spiritual path. What does it mean that speech was in exile? How can speech be exiled? How can it be redeemed? Why is that fundamental to Pesach? Let's try to spend a little time going through this together. And I ask you to focus and learn in a way that is unfamiliar. You know, let me say one introductory word here. Speech requires ears, right? That should be clear. Speaking requires ears. If there's no one to hear, it's not called speaking, right? If you speak to yourself, that's not really called speech. The mechanism, the idea of speech is to share, to take what is within you in abstraction, in thought, and to share it with someone else by the medium of expressing it in the world. And therefore, you need ears. And here's a fundamental message about Torah. That when you learn a Torah idea, it should create new ears. New ears. Right? Let me try to explain this briefly. That is the concept, the pasuk, the verse that talks about it. King David says, Oznaim karisa li Hashem. God, you tore open new ears for me. Your Torah opened new ears. The basic meaning of this is that when you learn a Torah idea, you're not supposed to learn the idea and put it into your structured, organized framework of thought. You should be developing a new framework of thought. A person who has an organized intellectual framework, and when they learn a Torah idea, they find a place for it in their framework, is not learning Torah. On the contrary, the more they learn, the worse they're getting. Torah needs to open a new place, a new framework, right? It is not, Rav Moshe used to say that you see the boys who come to yeshiva, you see those who have a structure, pre-formed structure. They've got a structured set of concepts, and everything you tell them, they slot away into their pre-formed system of knowledge, and they become firmer and firmer in their preconceptions. And the more you teach them, the worse they become. And if these people become powerful and influential, they become disastrous. And then you see those who are fascinated by what they learn, and everything that they learn opens a new dimension of consciousness for them. That's genuine learning. The first thing that a great master will do, you find this in Eastern teaching as well, the first thing that a master will do is break his student down, break the preconceptions, break open the vessels, and then you can teach. Torah must form new vessels. So let's try to do that, and let's try to avoid any preconceptions and not use words and concepts the way we're used to doing them. Let's see if the Torah of this area can break open, tear open new ears for us. Okay, that's what we're going to try to do in considering the concept of speech and its exile and redemption. Before we go into the depth here, I'm sure your minds are racing ahead. I'm sure you're all spiritual black belts, and I'm sure you've already thought through the possibilities of why Egypt was a place of speaking that was imprisoned. Let's think about it briefly for a moment. You know that the month of Nisan, the month we're going through now, the pinnacle of which is expressed as Pesach, the month of Nisan is actually the month of speaking. I'm sure you're aware that there are 12 basic elements to all of reality. Reality that we inhabit has 12 defining characteristics. We don't have time now to prove that and go into the background, but just very briefly, I'm sure you know we live in a three-dimensional world. We call it in English three-dimensional, but of course in Torah and Kabbalistic thought we call it six-sided, right? Six-sided. 3 dimensions means left, right, front, back, up, down. So we talk about a six-sided reality. And 6 sides are bound by 12 lines, right? Think about the stylized representation of 6 sides of a cube. There are 12 lines that surround the cube, right? They fully define the cube. The 6 lines, the 6 facets of the cube define all the directions, but the 6 lines bound the cube specifically. Actually, the Kabbalistic lines are not the lines around the cube. They're actually the diagonals inside the cube, but I'm not going to that now. Karen, I'm not sure what you're trying to tell me with the pyramids and New Torah, but stay with me, Karen, as everyone else, and I'll try to do my best to explain this. So listen, try to take this in on a new level and see what we can understand. So we have 12 elements of reality. And of course, it doesn't take a moment to realize that these correspond to the 12 months of the year, the 12 tribes of the Jewish people, the 12 the 12 faculties of the body that the Sefer Yetzirah talks about, the 12 parts of the body, the 12 letters in the Hebrew alphabet that are single letters. You're probably aware that the Hebrew alphabet's divided into 3 sets of letters. The 3 mother letters, which are Aleph, Mem, and Shin. Kabbalistically, the Aleph this way, Mem, and Shin. The 3 horizontal lines in the body connecting the right and left arms, the 2 sides of the brain, and the 2 kidneys. Those are the 3 mother letters. Then you have 7 doubled letters, what we call Beged Kaporet. Those are the 7 letters in Hebrew that have 2 forms. They can take 2 forms like Bet and Vet. Okay, Taf and Saf, letters that take a dot or no dot. And that leaves 12 letters, which are Pshutos, or so-called simple letters that have only 1 form. Those 12 letters correspond, each of them, to a month and to a tribe and to a part of the body. The month of Nisan, let's spend a moment on that. The month of Nisan corresponds to the right leg. After all, this is where the journey begins. Lechtech acharai bamidbar, you followed me into the desert. So the right leg, we won't speak about that on this occasion. But David, I think there's 6, if I'm not mistaken. I think there's 6, not 12. Think about that. Maybe I'm wrong. But be that as it may, we are talking here about the right leg. But the month of Nisan is the faculty of speech, right? 1 month Adar happens to be laughter. And there's a month that corresponds to walking. There's a month that corresponds to seeing and to hearing. The month that corresponds to speech is Nisan. So this month is characterized by speech. It is also the letter Hey, the first of the 12 letters in the alphabet that are simple letters is a Hey. So we're talking here about the month of speaking, the letter Hey, and all of these have to do with speech. Hey is the first sound uttered when you speak, right? Before you articulate, when you begin to speak, as you breathe, right? The inarticulated breath coming out of the mouth is in fact the beginning of speech. The root of speech is a Hey, and that's why the Torah says, Ele toldos hashamayim va'aretz, these are the generations of heaven and earth, behibar in their being created. If you look in the Sefer Torah, you will see that behibar is spelt with a little Hey, which actually technically spells behei bra'am. He created them with a Hey. It also means he created them with 5, like the 5 Chumashim. But one of the meanings of that verse is that Hashem created the world with a Hey, meaning that he spoke the world into existence, Vayomer Elokim, and God said, and the beginning of speech is the inarticulate, unarticulated, unvocalized sound of the breath. And therefore the beginning of speech is a Hey. That's what this month is. It is the faculty of speaking. It is also obviously the Haggadah. Right? The mitzvah of the month is the Haggadah. The matzah is really a show and tell aspect on which the story is told. Haggadah means talking or telling. I'm sure you're aware that in Hebrew the word Pesach means the mouth talks. Pesach, the mouth talks. And of course, the more you talk about at the Pesach Seder, the more you talk about the redemption, about the miracles of the redemption, the better it is. And therefore, this is the month of speaking, and Pesach is the time of speech. It is the time of the redemption of speech, says the Zohar. Speech was in exile, and it was redeemed in Egypt. Why am I doing all the thinking? Let me challenge you for a moment. I'll give you 5 seconds to answer. Give me a proof, please, that speech was exiled in Egypt, that Egypt was a place of inarticulacy, a squashing and a straightening and a constraining of the faculty of speech. Give me an obvious proof. I'll give you 5 seconds. Come on, type me an answer, please. Hila, you got it. You are the first. Karen, that is a general concept, but not a technical proof. Jeff, that is a very nice idea, but yes, Stan, of course, that's what I expect from an immunologist from Cape Town, indeed. Nechama, yes, indeed. Shani, I see all our regulars are on the ball. All my regulars. Ayo, that's quite correct. That's quite correct. Charlotte, Les, you're giving me something deep, but that's not Judy. Yes, yes, yes. Okay. No, I see that my regulars are with me. Edith, that's a nice idea, but there's something. Yes, of course, Rivka Panina. Yes, okay, I'm seeing that we certainly have some black belts in our session. The obvious proof is that Moses could not speak, right? Moshe Rabbeinu could not speak. He was inarticulate. He had some problem with his speech. And that is obviously a very clear indication that the spokesman of the Jewish people could himself not speak. So that is the proof. Yeah, you're all giving me very nice spiritual concepts, but I asked for a proof, right? The demonstration of the constraint of speech is the fact that the person who represents the entire Jewish people was unable to speak. The Maharal points out that when he left Egypt, after the Jewish people left Egypt and the Torah was given, Moshe Rabbeinu spoke normally, right? The speech faculty was returned in him, was redeemed. And we know that because it says, Ele hadvarim asher diber Moshe. These are the words that Moses spoke. The book of Deuteronomy, in fact, is where Moshe Rabbeinu began speaking himself. So that is quite correct. So you see clearly here that Pesach is the time of the constraint of speech. Let's try to take this a little bit further. Bracha, I'm getting some feedback on the line. Maybe somebody's mic's open. So maybe you can just shut that down. Thank you. Okay, let's take that a little bit further. Obviously, welcome, Harry. The fact that Moshe Rabbeinu could not speak is very strange. He was the spokesman of the Jewish people, transcendently perfect in every way, and the very faculty that he will need the faculty of speech was denied him. Right? This is a very, very strange idea. If you'd like to look this up in detail in the Drosha Saran, in the third Drosha, it talks about this in detail. I won't go into that idea in detail. I'll try and give you the insight of the Maharal here. But it is true that he could not speak. Yaakov, you're quite correct. You are quite correct. And let me take that a little bit further. It is true that the speech, the organ of speech, is located in the throat, right, in the neck. The neck is the place of connection between the head and the body. Let's try to go a little bit deeper into what speech is, and then we'll understand what Egypt is, and what the exile of speech is, and what speaking means. So the place of the origin of speech is the neck. The neck always means connection between abstraction of thought in the head and practical expression in the body. That is what a neck means. Let me ask you to hold the questions if you don't mind. Emily, Sarah, I'm getting a lot of people giving me comments and questions. I cannot do justice to your questions. So hold the questions for a moment, and we'll try to leave time for that later if it's possible. But just stay with me and see if we can build something a little bit new. The speech, the definition of speech is connection, right? That's the root of speaking. It is connection. It is connection of abstract thought potential with articulate expression in the world. Obviously, it is also connection between people. When the Mishnah wants to use a euphemism for male-female intimacy, it talks about people speaking to each other. Right? Obviously, it's being clean and refined, but in Torah, everything is always true. And therefore, the euphemism must be true as well, which means that male-female intimacy is a form of speech. Speech means connection at a very deep level. The neck is the place of connection at a deep level. It is the organ that connects the world of abstraction with the body. Speaking, by the way, in Hebrew, dibur, does not mean literally speaking. Dibur means hanhaga. Hanhaga means taking plan and manifesting it in practice. Connecting potential with actual. For example, dabar echad lador means a leader of a generation, not necessarily one who speaks. Or yad ber amim tachtenu, which means that one nation will dominate and control another nation. We're talking about control, about a plan manifested with force in the world. Speech just happens to be one particularly refined and articulate way of taking an abstraction, an idea, and manifesting an expression in the world. But speech is much deeper than simply what is done with the mouth. And the neck is the place which is the perfect place for the origin of speech. Obviously, deeper than the neck, in the chest is where the breath comes from, but the beginning of vocalization is in the neck. If you look in Kabbalistic works, you will notice that when they talk about the anatomy, the spiritual anatomy of the spiritual worlds, this part of the body here, the front of the neck, is called Moshe. This is called Moses. It's sometimes called the high priest, Kohen Gadol, but it's usually called Moshe. Moshe, the one who is the speaker, right, without referring at the moment to his defect of speech, he's the spokesman. He brings Hashem's work into the world. And this is the place that is called Moshe Rabbeinu. This is called Moses. We have a phrase, Shechina medaberes mitoch grona shel Moshe. The divine presence speaks from the throat of Moshe, right? This is the place that gives voice to Hashem's expression in the world. You know, it is the neck where the voice is formed, and it's the front of the neck. You're probably aware that in the spiritual structure, the front of a thing is always the place of its sanctity. The back is always the place of its darkness, where you cannot see. When a human being wishes to see God, the best he can do is see the back of the head, the back of the neck, right? You cannot see the front, that is too high. In Hebrew, the front is called panim. The word for the face is panim. It's exactly the same Hebrew word as panim, which means the inside. The face is the external part that shows the inside. That's why the face needs no garments. There's no shame in the face. It's not a nakedness. So the front of the body, the front aspect is always sanctity, relationship, uniqueness, recognizability. The back is always darkness, foreignness, unrecognizability, excretion. The back is always the beginning of the fallen side. This part of the body, the front of the neck, is called Moshe. The back of the neck is called Ha'oref. Right? Ha'oref. Orpah was a woman named for the back of the neck because she turned her back on Judaism and went back to her people. Oref. Ha'oref is the back of the neck. In Kabbalistic sources, there's a teaching that if you wish to see the dark side of something, you spell it backwards, right? For obvious reasons. If you spell Ha'oref backwards, it spells Paroi, Pharaoh. Moshe, Paroi, right? Moshe is the one who speaks Hashem's voice in the world. Paro is the one who says, Mi Hashem, we have nothing to do with him. We keep his voice out of the world. Very, very clear. So the narrow constraint of the neck, right? The neck is the narrow constraint. It is a narrow place. Mitzrayim, Egypt, means a narrow place, right? Mitzrayim means Meitzar Yam. Meitzar Yam, the word spells Meitzar Yam. It means the constraint of the 50th, right? In Torah, 50 is always the transcendent and the spiritual. 49 is always the measure of a material world, right? 7 times 7 builds the material world. That's why when you travel from Egypt to Sinai, you have traversed 49 days. And the 50th day, the giving of the Torah, which is completely transcendent, that is beyond all measure. That's why we don't count the 50th day. When we get to the end of the counting of the Omer, we enter Shavuot, which is the time of the giving of the Torah. And in Shavuos, we don't count 50 because 50 is beyond all number. So the 49 is the natural and 50 is transcendent. Mitzrayim, Meitzar Yam, the place that squeezes the 50th. In Egypt, there's no expression. A slave is a person who has no expression. Moshe Rabbeinu cannot express himself. The Jewish people are unable to give expression to what it is that there are, right? That is a death situation. What characterizes dead people is the inability to express themselves. In Hebrew, death is the descent into death is called Yordei Duma, the people who descend into silence. Right? People who are dead are very conscious. Dead people are completely conscious, more conscious than you are, but they cannot express themselves. Not only that, the Gemara in Perek Chelek says that the angel who guards the dead is called Duma, silence, right? The name of the angel who's guarding the dead until the time of the resurrection, the name of that angel is called Duma, angel Duma. And people who are in the next world at the moment, in the holding zone, where they're not connected with bodies, that is a situation of inarticulate silence. That's called Duma. Mitzrayim was a place of spiritual death, where there's no ability to express the spiritual. That's where the Jewish people are born from. And they are constrained in that narrow place, right? That is the deep aspect of the slavery of Mitzrayim. The bodies being enslaved and made to work hard is only an external manifestation. But the inability to express themselves, right, and bring out their spiritual depth, that is what Egypt is, and that is the redemption from Egypt. That is what it means. So speech is the characteristic of the human being. You are born in the world to speak. We'll have to see in detail to speak minimally, where every word counts very potently. We're not talking about to spill words meaninglessly. That's a destruction and a travesty of speech. We'll have to understand that. But first of all, we have to understand that speaking characterizes the human being. You know that when humans were created, man and woman originally, it says, Vayipach ba'apav nishmas chaim, that God breathed into the human being a living soul, and the Targum translates it as Ruach Mamalala, a speaking soul, a speaking spirit. In other words, the definition of the human being is called a speaking being, right? You have different levels of reality. You have the domain, which is the inanimate world, the tzomeach, which is the plant world. Above that, you have the chai, which is the animal world. And above that, the human world is called medaber, the speaking world. What's unique about us is that we speak articulately, unlike the animal world or the plant world or the inanimate world. We are speaking beings. Means we can give expression to an inner depth in the manifest version that we call speech. And therefore, that is the meaning of the faculty of speech. It is characteristic of a human being. This is obviously why, a moment's thought, if you think a little further, you realize that the sins of speech in Torah are the worst, right? This is why, for example, Lashon Hara, speaking Lashon Hara, which is speaking badly about people, saying true things, right, is so disastrous, right? Even though you are speaking true, all you say is, you say that person gets angry, this is a jealous person, you're speaking absolute truth. And the Talmud says this is worse than murder and immorality and idolatry, which is a very, very extreme statement. And the reason is because you are perverting the essence of what it is to be a human being. You are using speech for harm, right? Notice, by the way, that the travesty of Lashon Hara is worse in one way than telling lies. And the reason is because lies are not real speech. Lies are pretense at speech. Lies is words from the lips out, but not taking something genuine and expressing it in the world. Lashon Hara is when you use genuine speech, when you take a real speech, you take what is true in the world and you express it. Right? That is real speech, and you're using that for harm, is a travesty and a betrayal of what it means to be human. Because speaking is the ability to connect. This is the root of the idea of tefillah also, prayer, which is an expression. And it is why the mitzvahs of speech are so potent. And that is why the first month of the year, which is the month of Nisan, which we lift off into the miraculous. Nisan means miracles, right? It means the miraculous. The first month of the year is characterized by the faculty of speech. It is the first letter of speech, which is the Hey, just like it's the right leg, Jane, which means where the journey begins, right? Just as the inarticulate beginning of speech comes from the mouth, when the body expresses itself, it's the right leg, the leg that steps out into the desert on that journey towards Sinai. And that is the idea. Let's go one step further. Why is it, if speech is the essential faculty defining a human being, that the ultimate human being who led the Jewish people out of Egypt was unable to speak? Right? What exactly does that mean? Why was Moshe Rabbeinu, unable to speak? The Ran gives a more practical answer, if you like. It's worth looking up there. He goes into in detail. And the answer that he gives for purposes of his analysis is that the Torah was given in a way that has its own proofs. In other words, Hashem wants to give us the Torah in a way that corroborates itself. And he gives examples of that principle. But one of the methods of doing that in the world is that the Torah was given by a person who was inarticulate, that there should never be a claim that we were swayed by a slick speaker, right? In other words, if the Torah were given to us by an unbelievably talented and miraculous, a person who could almost miraculously express himself, just like he could almost miraculously relate to God, his prophecy was far above any normal level of prophecy. If his speech had that level of expertise, if his speech were functioning at that level, there would always be the suspicion that it was his power of speech that convinced us and sold us what we call the Torah, right? You probably know that people who are very articulate can make anything convincing. And if a person is good enough, if he has the gift of the gab, he can sell you snake oil. And before you know it, you've bought it, even though you know that actually you probably shouldn't. And throughout history, powerful speakers have swayed crowds and swayed nations. And the Jewish people, ironically and paradoxically, were led by a person who could not do that. And this was a protective mechanism so that when the Torah was given for all time, nobody could ever make the claim that it was a slick orator, a very powerful public speaker who swayed the Jewish people. That is what the Ran says. And of course, for his purposes and what he's teaching over there, that is what he says. But let me share with you a deeper insight, which I heard originally from Rav Moshe Shapiro. And perhaps here, more than elsewhere, we need to have new ears and hear something that's a little bit deeper. And the reason is because we live in a world of perverted speech. Obviously, first of all, we live in a world of unclean speech, right? What's wrong with unclean speech, right? With swear words and cursing and vulgar speech. What's wrong with it is not because we are prudish, right? On the contrary, Torah is not prudish at all. If you look through Torah, you will find the most purple and explicit passages dealing with all, nothing could be less prudish than Torah. And if it isn't in Torah, if you look in the Gemara, right, you will find the most detailed description of the most lurid aspects of humanity, of course, taught with the right values. I've always been amazed how 15-year-old adolescents, boys are sitting in yeshiva and they're reading material that is as explicit as it gets, and they're doing it with the sanctity of Torah learning. But it's not because we're prudish at all, but because when you sully the mouth, when you take that speech faculty, which defines our spiritual essence, the ability to connect the spiritual world with the material world, and you sully that, you bring that down into the gutter, right? You are manifesting a travesty of what it is to be human. You're soiling, right? There used to be a time when in decent company, that sort of language was unacceptable. Today, it's be completely acceptable in the media, in the newspapers, right? Even on the BBC, that august source of refined expression, right? You cannot allow a child to listen even to an academic program on the BBC today, because there's no concept of withholding or refining speech. It is vulgar, and it's a lost battle. But I'm talking not only about vulgarity. We live in a world of completely unnecessary speech, right? C.S. Lewis, one of the great writers of the last generation, he said we live in a cataract of nonsense, right? Referring to the media of his day. Can you imagine what he would have said about this generation? People live in a world where they cannot live in silence. If they're on their own, they quickly switch on some program. They're driving in their car, they have to listen to some idiot interviewing people who know absolutely nothing about the subject, right? Giving his opinion, he knows even less. And then they feel well informed, right? Because absolute fools who know nothing about a subject are expressing their views. Of course, there may be like all social movements and all media. Of course, there's a nucleus of truth in it. It may serve a purpose, but again, the main thing is people can't bear to live in silence where they commune deeply with themselves. Let's talk about this, because of a fundamental problem, and this is the redemption of speech that we're talking about in Egypt. We're not talking simply about the ability to express yourself and say what you think. We're talking about something much deeper than that. And the training, to train this faculty of reaching depth and bringing it out, amazingly, the training tool is silence. Silence. The Mishnah says nothing better for you than silence. And here we face the paradox of having to talk about silence in words. By definition, impossible. But of course, let me try to do that as best I can and see if we can reach for a genuine redemption of what it means to be speaking beings in the world. You know that the faculty of speech brings out into the practical, and the price you pay for that is that you shrink infinite concepts down to finite words. Follow me carefully here, please, because this is a fundamental idea. The benefit of speech is that you can take something in your mind that's unrevealed and you can share it with someone else and reveal it. The price you pay is that you constrain, you squeeze the words down to the finite packages of particular words. That's the problem. It's a very heavy price to pay, right? Let me try to explain this a bit better. When you try to convey something that has deep meaning for you, you will notice that the words are incapable. You cannot do that. When you try to express something technical, the words can do it perfectly. If you want to transmit a professional idea, a technical idea, mathematical, engineering, structural, geometric, those things can be perfectly expressed in words. In fact, if you cannot express the idea in words, you probably did not understand it yourself. A very good test of your own understanding is try to express it, and if you can fully express it or specify it, then you understood it. However, when it comes to the deeper aspect, the meaningful aspect of life, the things that are not technical and geometric and mathematical, there's no way words can express them. Take something simple like your experience of the beauty of a sunrise. Try to convey that to somebody who does not share that experience. You'll find it utterly impossible. We are incapable of putting real meaning into finite words. People live together for 50 years and then begin to realize they never understood from the beginning what the other person was saying. I mean, that's a man's problem usually, right? Women usually understand what their husbands mean despite what they say, fortunately or unfortunately, as the case may be. But the point is that when you shrink a concept into words, you pay the price of limiting it to just what those words mean, right? Let me give you the best example I can think of. The Maharal says, this is an absolute classic, which he writes in his book, Tiferes Yisrael. There's an absolute classic, typical and classical of Maharal's thought. He says the reason that Moses couldn't speak well, the reason that Moshe Rabbeinu could not speak well, was because he was living in a world that transcends words. He was living in a world of Torah where things have infinite connection. Everything that he grasped and knew in his world was infinitely and endlessly connected to all other things in the oneness of Hashem's revelation. And therefore he was living in a world of oneness. He was living in the world which far transcends the finite particulars of any word. The reason he could not speak well was a sign of his perfection, not his deficiency, right? It's inconceivable to think of Moshe Rabbeinu as having a defect, says the Maharal. He is not having a defect. The reason he could not speak normally was because he was grasping things in their intense and infinite connections. As soon as you say things like that in words, you limit them only to these words. And no amount of words, no matter how many words, no matter how well chosen, no matter how articulate, can ever express the entirety of meaning of a thing. And therefore the reason that Moshe Rabbeinu could not speak was because he was living in the world of the source of all ideas where all things are one. And in that world, there's no way to bring those things down into words. As soon as you say them in words, you are cheapening and fracturing, right? And breaking up, bringing into the finite world. Yes, you are giving birth to the thing. That's wonderful. But you're giving birth to a limited reality. You probably know that when a child is conceived, the seed given from the man is given by the billion. The egg from the woman is given only one. Right? The beauty of the male dimension is its endless potential. The curse of the male dimension is its only potential. The beauty of the female dimension is she gives birth in the world. But the curse of the female dimension is only this one. All the millions that could have been are no longer. right? Why do we refer to God as male, typically? Because he's endless potential. The world is always female. All the Hebrew words for the earth are feminine. And therefore, the beauty of birth in the world is that you have a live birth in the world. But the curse is that a finite world can only hold finite shapes and finite forms, and the infinite potential must be sacrificed. Potential is always infinite. When you wake up in the morning, what you could do in this day, when the day stretches ahead of you, the potential is endless and it's perfect. Nothing's gone wrong yet, right? You could do thousands of things, but at the end of the day, when you collapse exhausted in bed, what do you have from the day? Only what you actually gave birth to, the limited amount of events and things that you actually did that day. The beauty of the morning potential is that it's very inspiring. The problem is you haven't done anything yet. The beauty of the night when the day's over is what you've done. You'll have that forever if you did something meaningful. The curse is, but all the other things died. Right? Before I continue, just give me a quick yes, please, on the screen. If I'm making sense. Right? If you're with me at all, please give me a quick yes so that I know that you. Good. Okay, Aviva, Karen, Shoshana, Chanrochel, I see my team is with me. Good. Harry, great. Okay, Jeff, Sarah, Jane, oh, great, wonderful. Okay, good. I must say that my tick, great. David, yes. Okay, great. Good. Thank you, Jody. Okay, so we're together. Let's take this a little bit further. Let me give you a few other examples. Haley, nice to see you. Yes, and I'm glad you're with us. Let us, Gary in Cape Town, Gershon, nice to have you with us. Great. Okay. Stay with me. Let me give you a couple more examples. You know probably that Kabbalah is called Sod. Right? The Kabbalistic wisdom is called secret. It's called the secret wisdom. Yes, Pam. Wow, that's a beautiful comment. I'll come to that in a moment. Hold that. I'll come back to it. Indeed, beautiful. You know what, Pam? That is such a beautiful comment. I'll talk about it now. When the angel hits the child is in the womb, taught the whole Torah. As he's about to be born, he gets a blow on the mouth, a sharp and shocking blow, and it causes him to forget all his spiritual wisdom. And then he's born as a simple child who knows nothing in the world and must spend his life fighting to get back the wisdom that he was once given for free. This is a wonderful subject. It has a tremendous application to Pesach. I wrote a whole book about that. That's called Living Inspired, and you can look that up. But there's one beautiful point that you, Pam, have brought out here, and let me honor that by speaking about it for a moment. The question here that the Maharal deals with is, when the angel hits the baby and shocks him into forgetting all of his Torah, right? He hits him on the mouth, and that is problematic. Why does the angel hit the baby on the mouth? If you wish to make someone forget something, you hit them on the head, right? The classic image of making someone forget is a sharp blow to the head. Why is the child given a blow on his mouth? How would that make him forget spiritual wisdom? And the Maharal says something stupendous here that takes your breath away. And if it doesn't move you, there's hope for you. The Maharal says that the blow on the mouth is the gift of speech. Why is a gift described as a blow? I'm not going to go into that now, but there's a chazal that says that every blade of grass has an angel that strikes it and says, grow. A blow is always an invitation to grow. It's a demonstration that you're deficient. It's a shocking realization that you're not perfect. And that, on the positive side, is an invitation to grow. The child's blow that he receives, that makes him see that he has work to do, is a blow in the mouth. It is the gift of speech. Says the Maharal, the moment you're given the gift of speech, you forget the wisdom. You can't have both. Let me try to put this into impossible words. When you know a thing, it is impossible to express it. When you know a thing deeply, you can't say that thing. If you manage to squeeze it into words, you've killed it. You've killed it. When the child lives in the womb, unable to express himself, and let me remind you that Egypt was called the womb of conception of the Jewish people, right? The Medrash says that Hashem, God took us out of Egypt like the shepherd puts his hand into the animal when she's giving birth and helps to deliver the calf. That's how Hashem came into the place of contamination, which is Egypt, and helped to give birth to us. When the child is in the womb, he cannot speak, and that's why he can know the whole Torah. But as soon as he's born in the world and he gets the ability to speak, he no longer can know. Here's the meaning. Here's the point. When you understand something deeply and it connects with your infinite, endless inner being, you know it. As soon as you package it in words, you lose it. You risk losing it. Let me put it to you this way. The great Rab Simcha Zissel, great Mussar teacher of the last generation, right? He once wrote a letter to his son. And he wrote in his letter to his son, he said to him, yes, I'm getting lots of comments, but stay with me. Let's do a little listening if you don't mind, just for a while. I'd love to see your comments, but let me try to take this a little bit further. He wrote a letter to his son, and he said to him, I'm about to share with you a Torah idea. I heard this 25 years ago from Rav Yisrael Salanta, and for 25 years I've never said it. And the reason I never said it was because I was worried that if I said it, I would lose it. Let me say that again. This great Torah sage heard a very, very deep and meaningful idea, and for 25 years he felt he couldn't risk speaking it, because if he spoke it, he would reduce it to those words. He wanted to be sure that it had seeped into the fabric of his consciousness, become part of him before he could risk speaking it. And for the first time after 25 years, he said to his son, now I feel I can transmit this to you, because I feel that it's already become part of what it is that I am. Here's the message for you. When you speak, you risk killing and shrinking and freezing what it is that you knew. At least think about it for a while, sleep on it, let it seep into the depth of your consciousness before you spit it out in words. We have a tremendous temptation that when we hear something beautiful and meaningful, we immediately want to share it with someone else. Okay, but not immediately. Think about it for a while. Let it speak to you first before you simply pass it from going in to going out. Let's take this a little bit further. The Kabbalistic wisdom is called Sod, right? That means secret. Why is the Kabbalah called secret? Jeff, could you hold the questions for a moment? Yes, you're right, quite right about that. That is exactly why the oral law is oral. And if you look in my new book, you'll see the whole book is about that theme. Indeed. In fact, the book comes with a chart I've prepared. You can actually pull it out the back of the chart and see the overview of Jewish history and see exactly where that change occurred. Edith. Yes, indeed. Stay with me carefully. Why is Kabbalah called Sod? Why is it called secret? The beginner thinks because you don't know it, right? Why is it a secret? Because no one told you. But the beginner thinks that one day you'll be walking through the streets of the old city of Jerusalem, and a hand will reach out from a narrow alley and pull you in, and there you'll be facing an old man with a long gray beard, and he'll tell you all the secrets of Kabbalah, and then you'll know. That is obviously an immature conception, and I'll tell you why. If Kabbalah is called secret, it is not because you don't happen to know, because as soon as you know, it wouldn't be secret anymore. Again, in Judaism and in Torah, we always name things with precision and accuracy. If Kabbalah is called secret, it must be intrinsically secret, not because you don't happen to know. Let me try to say this more clearly. If we call the Kabbalistic wisdom the secret wisdom, and it happens to be called secret because not many people know, but it's only secret to those people, the experts who know it, for them it's not a secret. That does not mean, John, you're not quite right, John. I'll give you a chance to rephrase that. Come on, do me a favor. John, you said you can never know it. There's one word wrong in your statement. Come on, make my day, please. Kabbalah is called the secret wisdom because, not because, yes, indeed, Jeff. I want John to say that. Come on, John, do better, please. Make my day. Of course you can know Kabbalah, but you cannot. What cannot you do with Kabbalistic wisdom? John? Tamar, that's one particular application. Let me say, yes, indeed. Chen, Irma, Rivka, Shani. Come on, John, I'm waiting for you. Chaim. Okay, here's the concept. You can know Kabbalah, but you can never speak it. Right? It's called secret because it can never be said. It's a secret wisdom because it lives only in the inner private zone of the mind. It's called a secret. Nechama, what's the problem? I don't understand. Respond to my students. John is not one of our students. John is a new name to me. Nechama, so I think you must be misunderstanding. John C. is a new name in my group, and I'm encouraging him, right, to try to think and go to a new level of thought. But here's the concept. The Kabbalah is called secret because it is something that can never be put into words. The Mishnah says that the master teaches the disciple only by giving him a general concept. And when the student falls in and grasps it himself, then he realizes that the words are not adequate and the words are not necessary. The Mishnah says, Daniel, nice to have you. I haven't seen you for a long time. Great to have you in the group for a change. The Mishnah says that the master teaches the disciple by giving him Rosh Prakim. Rosh Prakim means he gives him only the general direction. Once the student falls in and gets it himself, then he realizes what it means and why it could not be spoken in words. So again, let me sum it up. Kabbalah is called secret wisdom because it can never be expressed in words. It is intrinsically secret because it is that wisdom which relates to the deeper world. The deeper world cannot be articulated. It lives in the mind beyond words. You know things because you know them. You know who you are, for example. You know who you are because you know it, not because you can express it in words. Right? Let me say that again. How do you know you exist? It has nothing to do with a discussion or a conversation. You know it in a raw, immediate fashion. How do you know you're human and not animal, by the way? Not a logical discussion that goes on in your mind. If it is, you're in big trouble. How do you know you're male and not female? Is it a technical discussion in your mind? How do you know you're Jewish and not Jewish? How do you know that you're human and not animal? How do you know you have free will? How do you know you make a free will decision? There's no external explicit proof of that. These most important things. Do you know what I think therefore I am means, Pam? It means I know deeply, therefore I am. That's what he meant. He did not mean that you think logically and therefore you know that you are because you can figure it out. If you have to figure out that you exist, you are in big trouble. The deep things that the mind knows, it knows beyond words. It knows them as they are. On the contrary, when you put them into words, you lose them. Let me give you another example. I'll give you another example. Do you know that many people who went through the war, many people, old people, who lived through the European destruction, never spoke about it ever. That's a very common experience. People tell you, my grandmother or my mother, my aunt, she went through the camps, and for the rest of her life, she never spoke about it ever. Young people misunderstand that silence. They think that these people didn't speak because it was too painful. That's not the reason. They didn't speak because they couldn't. How do you begin to put into words something that goes beyond all human understanding? How do you put into words the torture of a child? One child tortured to death in front of his parents, right? Just because he happened to be a Jewish child. Where do you begin? And you multiply that to millions? How do you begin to put that into words? Any bringing down of an experience like that, which is utterly transcends all human understanding and all human sense of anything that it means to be human, right? As soon as you bring that into words, you trivialize it. They didn't speak about it because there are no words for such things, right? That's very important to understand. By the way, there's an opposite, there's a corollary to that. When people are suffering a suffering that is too heavy to bear, a suffering that's beyond human capacity to bear, the therapy is speaking. If you can get a person to speak about such a trauma, and once they begin speaking, often the words pour out, that's very therapeutic, because an infinite pain has now taken form. It's become contained in a set of words, right? It begins to be therapeutic that way. And therefore, it's another expression of the same theme. And let me come to a final point. I don't want to keep you longer than the hour. Les, what are you saying to me? Yes, indeed. Beautiful. That's beautifully put. Couldn't have said it better. Totally the direction that I'm going in. Let me try to put this, the final piece of the puzzle, if I may. The method you use to develop speech correctly is silence. For everything you can express in the world, there needs to be a depth, a wellspring from where those words come that is inarticulate. Let me try this. This is nothing more important than this to understand. The redemption of speech doesn't mean you come out of Egypt and now you can chat meaninglessly. Right? We're not talking about that. Slaves can chat meaninglessly. We're talking about coming out of Egypt where something tremendously deep that could never be expressed can be expressed in the world, but it's expressed only as the tip of an iceberg, that for everything you say, there must be far more that's inexpressible. If you meet someone, you have a new friend, you go out for a cup of coffee, and they sit down, and in 20 minutes, they tell you all about themselves. That person is simply 20 minutes of talk. That friendship will end very soon because there's no more discovery and excitement in that relationship. A real relationship with a person of depth is a person that for everything they express, you begin to realize how much more there is that you haven't discovered yet. And not only that, as you discover more about the depth of their personality, you suddenly realize that they are developing more within themselves. They are maturing. They are growing deeply within themselves. That's an exciting relationship. A human being is a speaking being, a being bringing down from the higher world what can be expressed in this world, but never cutting it off, never expressing it fully, never reducing it into a package of finite words, so it becomes a cheap talk show. Let me try to take this a little bit further. Jeff, Paymon, yes, indeed, Paymon, thank you. Let me take this one step further. In the few minutes we have left, let me share with you something of exquisite beauty. This is what Rabbi Moshe Shapiro said. I could almost not believe these words when he said them. Right? Something beyond expression. And I choose those words well. But let me try to say this. He said when he was 11 years old in Tel Aviv, he grew up in Tel Aviv in those years and before the state. And on Shabbos afternoon, he used to spend the Shalosh Seudos, the third meal. He used to spend with some old Hasidim. He said simple people, Europeans, come to Israel. And on Shabbos afternoons, he said they looked like angels. They were artisans, not academics, not necessarily intellectuals. But on Shabbos afternoon, they looked like angels, and they shared Torah ideas. And one Shabbos afternoon, it happened to be Pasha Shmini, which is the next Pasha we're about to read in the Torah. One of these Hasidim gave an explanation of the Haftarah of Shmini. The most amazing thing about this discussion is that an 11-year-old child could understand this. That's beyond all belief. He heard this when he was 11, right? You would do well to think about this the rest of your life to understand it. When he was 11 years old, he heard this idea of incredible abstraction. And much later in his life, many decades later, he taught it to us. And here's what he said. It says in Pasha Shmini that King David was dancing ecstatically in front of the ark. When he was bringing the ark on its journey up to Yerushalayim in preparation for building the Beis HaMikdash, it says, "V'David mecharker b'chol oz lifnei Hashem." King David was dancing with all his power and might in front of Hashem. For God's glory, for Hashem's glory, he was dancing in the street. Dance, you know, is a very, very deep expression, right, of who you are. It is any movement, any gesture is a speaking. Obviously, the Gemara says you can see if a person's wise by the way they walk. Dance is an extremely articulate expression of the inner being from the whole body. Can you imagine the ecstasy? Can you imagine what it looked like to see King David dancing in the street? However, Michal, his wife, was not impressed. Not impressed at all. When he got home, she criticized him. She said, "You danced in a very unbecoming fashion there. But in the eyes of the maidservants of your people, you exposed yourself in those Jerusalem streets. That you danced in such a way that we saw too much of you. Right? We saw it was unbecoming and undignified." Right? And she went so far as to call him Ke'echad HaRekim, like one of the empty fellows. Empty. Can you imagine calling King David empty? What an unbelievable insult. Right? And David said to her, "You think that is all the dance I will do for Hashem's glory? I will belittle myself even more than this. I will lower myself even more. In the eyes of the same maidservants that you complain about, I will reveal even more." What is this husband-wife argument? What exactly does it mean? The superficial understanding is King David was dancing in undignified fashion. You could see his ankles. His wife didn't approve, right? Perhaps you could see his knees, right? And she didn't approve of that. That's not dignified for a king. Said this old chassid, that's not what the complaint was. This is not a simple husband-wife argument about whether the king was dignified or not. She was not complaining because you could see his knees. She was complaining because you could see his soul. What she meant was, it's unforgivable to reveal all that you are in the world. Your dance was so ecstatic, we saw to the bottom of your soul. Your body expressed your mind so perfectly that we saw all that you are. And that's unforgivable. When a human being demonstrates what they are in the world, and they reveal everything that they are, they've cut themselves off from the infinite source. For everything you say in the world, there must be more wisdom that could never be said. For everything you reveal in a relationship, there must be more depth of emotion and more depth of understanding that you could never reveal. When you're a teacher in the world, everything you dare teach your students must be an absolute minimum that the student needs at that time, but informed by a wealth of depth and understanding and information, far more than could be said to the student at that time. If you express all that you are, you've emptied yourself out. If you say everything you know, you've left nothing behind. Everything that's expressed in the world must be the tip, just the trickle, the minimum aspect, the external aspect of a deep connection to a wellspring that is infinite. And her criticism of David was that you danced so expressively in the street, we saw to the bottom of your soul. That's unforgivable. And therefore, that was a criticism. And David said to him, "You think that's all there is? Do you think I've forgotten that fundamental rule of what it means to be spiritual? You have no idea how much more there is. What was seen in those Jerusalem streets by the maidservants of the Jewish people was nothing compared to what I have hidden in my soul. And it goes on to say that Michal died in childbirth because of that criticism, right? It says, Lo vlad ad yom Moisa. She never had a child to the day of her death. The commentaries say it means she died in childbirth. Rav Moshe didn't say this, but I think it may be possible that she died in childbirth exactly for that reason. She accused him of emptying himself of all life, spilling out into those streets everything that he was, and in fact that was the consequence for her. She spilled all her life into that child and was left with nothing when she gave birth. I'm not sure I'm correct about that, but that is the point. And therefore, let me sum up and talk about, yes, Shoshana, there's a recording of this class. Yes, HJ, I'm not sure what your first name is. You're here to reveal your inner self and bring it into my say, but not all, not all. Everything you reveal in the world has to be an outer expression of an inner soul. The soul is inexpressible in the world. The soul is inexpressible. You can only demonstrate. The body can only demonstrate what the soul can express in the world, but not what it is. The inner aspect of the soul is infinite. It's connected to Hashem. Thank you, Harry. Thank you for those regards. So let me sum it up. We've run out of time. I don't want to keep Hannah and Bracha and all of you beyond the time limit. I just say Pesach was the constraint of speech. People not able to express themselves. And the counting of the Omer, moving towards Sinai, to reach a kiss, that he should kiss us with the kisses of his mouth, right? The organ of connection is the mouth, and that's why it kisses and speaks. Same organ has both functions, right? That's what the kiss of Sinai means. It is the organ of connection, and therefore it begins in the neck and it comes out of the mouth. Those are the structures of connection. And so Pesach is the time when speech is limited and imprisoned. And Pesach is Pesach, the mouth speaks. The Haggadah is all about teaching the children, but the thing to teach the children, the thing to teach the children is about our redemption from Egypt. But the Rambam says the thing you talk about is miracles. We're not talking about a redemption from one place to another. We're talking about a redemption from the natural to the miraculous. We're talking about a transcendence that cannot be put into words. So when your child's very small, you tell him at the Seder, we were prisoners, we were slaves, and we were freed. But when you're a little older than that, you have to realize we're talking about the redeeming of speech, giving voice to the soul. How much voice? Everything that the soul can express in the world. But for everything that you express, there has to be far more. And therefore, the dance that you do in the world can be ecstatic. And you can express all that the world can hold and all that a relationship needs, but never cut yourself off from the source of an endless connection. That is the price we paid in Egypt. That is the child born in the world. He gets the gift of speech, and the struggle that he must fight for the rest of his life is not to detach himself from that original point of wisdom. He must learn to speak in the world, but for everything that he speaks, right? For everything that you share in the world, for everything you speak in the world, there must be far more. And before you spit it out, make sure that it's seeped into the very being, the depth of your consciousness, and become. Torah is far more than can be expressed in the world. Right? Torah ideas, the deep aspect of consciousness, the things you know because you know them, right? And the modern Western philosophical tradition is always to try to express it and speak it out and prove it in an analytical fashion. That's fine and well, but all of that must be informed by something that is way deeper than coming. So two people know each other well, they don't need much speaking. Two people share deeply, know each other very well, half a word is good enough. But when you have to speak a lot, you have very little chance of communicating. The more words you need, probably the less chance you have of getting it across. I think this is a perfect time to stop speech. So let me wish you all, Les, have a wonderful, Jane, Paimon, Nechama. Let me wish you a Daphne. That is a new name to me. Okay, right. Okay, I hear that. Jeff, Nancy, to Hannah, to the read list. Nice to have you with us. I'm sure you knew all this, but great to have you with us. Thank you to all my usual partners in this effort. Thank you very much to Jewish Workshops, to Osamer. I wish all of you, thank you for joining us on this unique open webinar. It's been a pleasure to have all the names that I see and I cannot possibly acknowledge personally. But thank you very much for joining us. I wish you a fantastic Pesach, not only fulfilling all the mitzvahs, but learning to speak the speech of silence. Thank you and all the best.